Hello and welcome to History at Night. The word pirate instantly paints a picture in our minds. We see a daring figure with a sword on his hip, a parrot on his shoulder, and a map tucked into his coat, marked with an X that promises hidden treasure. We imagine gold coins glittering in buried chests, thrilling adventures across storm-tossed seas, and a life of pure freedom lived outside the reach of kings and laws. But the reality of piracy in the early 1700s, the so-called Golden Age, was anything but romantic. For most men, it was not a choice born of adventure, but of desperation. They were running from the back-breaking labour of merchant service, or from the king's navy, where discipline was brutal and wages unreliable. Their lives were filled with hunger, sickness, exhaustion, and boredom interrupted only by moments of sudden, violent danger. Tonight, we set aside the legends. We'll step onto one of these crowded wooden ships to see what life was truly like. We'll uncover the democratic codes that governed them, the harsh food and water that sustained them, and the reasons why ordinary sailors risked a short, dangerous life under the black flag rather than endure a long, miserable one in service to a crown. Before we set sail, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It's a simple way to support the channel, and it truly helps. I'd also love to know where in the world you're joining me from, and at what hour of the night. Leave a comment, I always enjoy reading them. Now, let the noise of the modern world fade. Imagine the creak of timbers, the groan of heavy ropes, the sharp scent of tar, the salt spray on your lips. Our story doesn't begin with a legendary outlaw. It begins with someone ordinary. Imagine yourself as that person. Not a hero, not a villain, simply a sailor in your early 20s. Your world is nothing more than a small, damp wooden ship creaking across the endless Atlantic. It is 2 hours before dawn. Already, you are weary. You weren't woken gently, but by the bark of the boatswain, the hard-voiced overseer of the deck crew. Your hands are raw, blistered, healed, and blistered again from hauling coarse, salt-stiffened ropes that hold the massive sails above. The air is cold and heavy with spray that never seems to dry, chilling you to the bone. Every muscle in your back and shoulders aches from relentless labour, not just today, but every day since you left Bristol 6 months ago. This is your life on a merchant vessel in 1716. It is not a life of adventure, it is unending, back-breaking work. You and a few dozen men are a tiny human island in a vast empty sea. The work never stops. You climb swaying masts on ropes, furling sails, with nothing but 100 feet of air and churning water beneath. You work the pumps to force out the foul bilge water that seeps constantly into the hull. You scrub the decks, mend torn sails, smear tar on ropes. Day after day, in blistering sun, in freezing rain. For this labour you are promised wages, but only when the voyage ends. If the ship sinks, you get nothing. If you die of disease or accident, your family receives nothing. Even if you survive, the captain, absolute ruler of this wooden world, can invent fines for trivial faults, and your pay vanishes. You've seen men work a year straight, only to receive a few shillings, barely enough for one night of drink before signing on again. And the food is worse than the pay. Each day you gnaw on hardtack, a biscuit of flour, water and salt, baked until it's like stone, usually riddled with weevils. Meat comes salted beef or pork stored for months in barrels so saturated with brine it must be scraped and soaked for hours before it can be swallowed. Water turns stagnant and slimy in its casks. Without fruit or vegetables, scurvy stalks the crew. You've seen men's gums bleed, their teeth fall out, their minds turn strange, all for lack of a lemon. Above it, all hangs discipline. The captain rules like a king. His law is the cato. 9 tails a whip with knotted lashes that can shred a man's back into ruin for the smallest mistake. There is no trial, no appeal, just the whistle of the lash and the scream that follows. And you know you are fortunate in a way. At least you chose this life. Many in the King's Navy did not. They were pressed into service, kidnapped from ports, or dragged from ships, forced to serve under harsher discipline, with the added terror of death in battle. This is your world: endless labour, vile food, stolen wages, arbitrary cruelty. Your future holds nothing but voyages repeating until sea or sickness ends you. But whispers spread among sailors, rumours of a different path. Dangerous, yes, but free. One grey morning, as you squint at the horizon, you see a sail. A smaller, swifter ship closing fast. Panic grips the deck. Then a puff of smoke, the thunder of a cannon, a shot skipping across the waves, a warning. Your captain knows resistance is hopeless. He strikes the colours. Grappling hooks bite into wood ropes, lash the ships together, and the strangers board. They are not ragged mobs, but sailors like you, moving with purpose. Pistols and swords at their sides, confidence in their step. Their leader is not the captain, but the quartermaster second in command, the crew's advocate. He speaks calmly. They want cargo, not blood. And they offer a choice. Stay with your captain and misery, or join them. Claim an equal share and live free, though briefly. You look at your shipmates. Most stay frozen, fearing the gallows, but you and a few others with little to lose step forward. The quartermaster smiles. You cross the rail, leaving your old life behind. A mug of grog, rum, and water is thrust into your hand. It tastes like freedom. Your old ship drifts away. You stand among outlaws. Relief fades into uncertainty. How can men without masters avoid chaos? The quartermaster unrolls worn parchment, the articles of agreement, the pirate code. Every man has a voice. The captain is elected and can be deposed. Shares are fair, no tricks. Weapons kept ready, quarrels settled, ashore lights extinguished by 8 for safety. Most astonishing of all, compensation for wounds paid from the ship's treasury before plunder is divided. One by one, you and the other recruits sign your names or marks. Ink seals the pact. You are no longer a wage slave. You are a brother in a republic afloat. With the articles signed, you are now a full member of this strange republic at sea. For the first time in your life, you possess rights, an equal voice in decisions, a guaranteed share of every prize, and the promise of care should you be injured. But rules alone do not make a society. A ship is more than parchment. An ink, it is wood, iron, and canvas, and now it is your home. You take your first real look at the vessel, not as a captive but as one of its crew. It is the same sloop that ran down your old ship with such ease. Lean and fast, it is no great man of war but a predator built for speed and striking power. Once a simple merchantman, it has been transformed into a hunter of sea lanes. The differences are obvious. You count more cannons than any honest trader would carry, their black muzzles jutting from freshly cut gun ports. The deck is stripped of clutter, cleared for combat. Coils of thick rope are neatly lashed down, pyramids of cannonballs rest in netting and long spare spars. Wooden poles for repairing sails are secured along the rails, ready for storm or battle. Every detail speaks of preparation and purpose. You close your eyes and listen. The ship has its own music, the groan of ancient timbers under strain, the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull, the sharp snap of canvas catching the wind. Above it all comes the eerie cry of a seabird circling overhead. It is a symphony of wood, wind, and water. The scents are just as powerful. Salt spray, sharp and clean, tar pungent and bitter, worked into every rope and seam. Together, they form the perfume of your new life. But to truly know the ship, you must go below. Climbing down a narrow ladder, a wave of hot, heavy air wraps around you. This is the 'tween deck, the main living quarters. There are no cabins, no private spaces, only a single low-ceilinged room for you and 80 other men. Rows of hammocks swing from the beams, strung so close you could reach out and touch the sailor beside you. Here you learn the genius of the hammock. Adopted from the native peoples of the Americas, it cradles you with the ship's constant motion, preventing you from being hurled to the floor in rough seas. You sling your own between 2 guns, your new sleeping place in this floating world. The air is thick with the stench of unwashed bodies. spilled rum, damp wool, and worse. Beneath it all lurks the smell of the bilge, the dark hollow at the bottom of the ship, where seawater spilled food and filth collect into a putrid soup. Its foul breath seeps through the planks, the permanent odour of your new home. You realise now why the code forbids fighting aboard. In such cramped, intimate quarters, even a small quarrel could turn deadly. Survival depends on discipline, fairness, and respect. Privacy does not exist. You will eat, sleep, and labour within arm's reach of your brothers. As night falls, you lie back in your hammock, rocked gently by the swell, surrounded by creaking timbers and snoring men. You know the rules, you know your place, but one question still burns in your mind. What exactly does a pirate do all day? The answer comes with the dawn. Your first full day as a pirate begins before the sun has risen. The watch system rules your life now. The crew is split in half, each standing 4 hours on duty, then 4 hours off around the clock. No weekends, no respite, only the endless rhythm of the watch. On deck, you find the work strangely familiar. Trimming sails to the wind, hauling ropes, climbing aloft with buckets of tar to coat the rigging, caulking seams with oakum to keep out the sea. You scrub away green algae, slicking the planks, check cannons to ensure they are clean and secure, and tend to powder kept bone dry in storage. Sometimes you climb to the crow's nest, high above the deck. From that tiny platform, you stare at the horizon for hours, searching for the shape of another sail. The view is boundless, a ring of endless water in every direction, hypnotic in its immensity. When your watch ends, you are exhausted. Yet time off duty is not leisure. You must eat, mend clothes, sharpen weapons, wash in seawater, and snatch a few hours of sleep before the next bell calls you back. The work is nearly identical to what you endured as a merchant sailor, yet everything feels different. No overseer curses you, no whip waits for the smallest mistake. The men labour together in quiet efficiency, each knowing the ship is their own. A well-kept vessel is faster, stronger, and more likely to win prizes. Every man works not out of fear but out of shared purpose, and your effort is an investment in your own fortune. The days blur into a cycle of work, food, and sleep, marked only by the sun's path and the change of the watch. You discover the true enemy of these long voyages is not storm or navy, it is boredom heavy and endless as the sea. In that monotony, you begin to notice something profound. This ship is not ruled by a single master. Authority is divided. The balance of power is delicate, intentional, and born of bitter experience. The captain commands respect. He is the expert navigator, the master of sails and stars, the leader in battle, but in daily life he is not supreme. He is more war chief than king, his authority absolute only in combat. When the call to fight comes, his word is law. He orders the sails, the shots, the boarding. In that chaos, no time exists for debate, and the crew obeys instantly. But when the guns fall silent, his power dissolves. He cannot flog, he cannot command whims. He is merely a man among equals, answerable to the crew. The real strength of the ship rests with the quartermaster. He is the peace chief, the advocate of the men. He settles disputes, distributes rations, leads boarding parties, and holds custody of the plunder. He is elected as the captain is, and his word is trusted. By dividing power between these two figures, the pirates have ensured that no man will ever again rule them as tyrant. It is government afloat, checks and balances written in salt and tar. The genius of this system becomes clear to you the more you see it in action. Each man knows his role, and yet every man knows his rights. The captain may command in battle, but the quartermaster safeguards daily life. It is a balance that keeps the ship from descending into tyranny or chaos. The quartermaster's duties are vast. He is the keeper of the ship's stores, measuring out food and water so that every sailor receives his fair portion. He is judge and jury, settling quarrels before they flare into bloodshed. If punishment is needed, It is he, not the captain, who enforces it, separating justice from personal vengeance. And when a prize is taken, he leads the boarding, seizing goods and guarding them until they can be divided openly. It is this fairness that binds the crew together. When you receive your daily ration, you know it is the same as every man's, his ration. When disputes arise, they are settled openly, not by a captain's whim, and when the spoils are divided, your share will be counted in plain sight. For the first time in your life at sea, you feel like more than a disposable tool. You are part of a brotherhood that protects its own. Yet fairness does not fill an empty belly. You soon discover that a pirate's diet is not so different from the grim fare of merchant sailors. The foundation of your meals remains the same. Hardtack biscuits, rock-hard flour, and water wafers, crawling with weevils and salted meat, so tough and briny, it must be soaked for hours before you can choke it down. Dried beans, peas, or oatmeal provide variety, but little comfort. The drink, too, is familiar. Fresh water sours quickly in casks, so it is mixed with rum to make grog. This daily ration is treasured not just for dulling the edge of thirst, but for the brief warmth and camaraderie it brings. In the middle of a long watch, a sip of grog can make the hardships easier to bear. But here lies the pirate's advantage. Unlike merchantmen chained to timetables, a pirate ship has freedom. It is not bound to any master's schedule. When supplies run low, the crew may land on a deserted island, hunting wild pigs or goats, and feasting on fresh meat, roasted over a smoky buccan fire. At sea, lines are cast from the stern to catch fish, and giant sea turtles, plentiful in the Caribbean, are prized above all, able to feed the crew for days, and kept alive on deck for weeks. The greatest meals, however, come not from nature, but from conquest. When you board a captured merchantman, the most joyous discovery is not always its cargo hold, but its captain's pantry. Here you find barrels of fine wine casks, of sugar spices, worth a fortune, and sometimes even live animals kept for fresh food. That night, the ship transforms into a banquet hall. The cook, normally just another sailor, with a knack for fire, becomes king of the galley. Bread is baked from stolen flour meat, is roasted over open flames, and mugs are filled with rich wine instead of thin grog. For a few fleeting hours, you and your brothers eat like lords. It is in these moments that the phrase "a short life and a merry one" makes sense. You feast not because tomorrow is certain, but because it is not. Yet the sea is always waiting with its dangers. A slip of a blade, a fall from the rigging, a fever caught in cramped quarters. Any of these can end your life. On most ships, an injured man is left to suffer or cast aside. Among pirates, necessity breeds compassion. They know that to lose a comrade weakens all. Doctors are rare treasures. If captured, a surgeon is prized above gold, and often persuaded or forced to join the crew, rewarded with a full share of plunder. Without one, the task falls to the carpenter, whose skill with saw and blade makes him a grimly practical surgeon. Amputations are swift, brutal affairs, numbed by rum and held down by shipmates. The odds of survival are slim, but better than the certainty of gangrene. The surgeon's chest, if one is found, is a prize of its own: knives, saws, probes, and strange medicines. Laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, offers pain relief. Mercury, dangerously toxic, is used in ignorance against disease. Herbs and powders are applied with hope rather than certainty. The smell of tar, sealing a wound, or the screams of a man under the cauterizing iron are all too common sounds after battle. Yet here, unlike the merchant service, you are not abandoned. The pirate code promises compensation. Lose a leg, and silver is set aside for you before the spoils are divided. Lose an arm, and your brothers will ensure you do not starve. It is crude, imperfect, but it is solidarity, and it is more than you ever had under any lawful flag. Navigation. Without it all, the courage, discipline, and fairness in the world would mean nothing. On an ocean without landmarks, where the horizon never changes, the ability to know where you are and where you are going means the difference between feasting on plunder or starving on an empty sea. The captain bears this burden. On some ships, a skilled sailing master shares it, but on yours the responsibility falls squarely on him. His tools are precious nautical charts, drawn by hand, often copied or stolen, filled with sketchy outlines of coastlines and notes on reefs, currents and islands. They are far from perfect, but they are lifelines. To find direction, the captain uses a magnetic compass. But direction alone is not enough. He must know speed as well. For this, a clever device is employed, the chip log. A small wooden board is cast over the stern, attached to a rope marked with knots at intervals. As the ship moves forward, the rope pays out. A sandglass measures the time, and by counting how many knots slip through the fingers, the navigator calculates speed. The word knot as a measure of speed comes from this very practice. With compass, chip, log and charts, latitude can be determined. At noon, the angle of the sun is measured with a quadrant or astrolabe. At night, the height of the North Star is taken. These angles tell how far north or south you are, with reasonable accuracy. But longitude east or west remains an unsolved mystery. No instrument exists to measure it. Instead, sailors rely on dead reckoning, estimating position by combining speed, direction, and time from a known starting point. A hidden current or a storm can throw calculations off by miles. And days later, the navigator's chart may show the ship in one place, while in truth, it drifts far elsewhere. To the skilled eye, the sea itself whispers clues. The colour of the water hints at depth. The flight of seabirds suggests land nearby. The pattern of swells reveals distant winds. Hellman, it is a science built not only on instruments, but on intuition and experience. Each day the horizon remains the same, an unbroken circle of water. Each day the navigator's work offers hope that the emptiness will finally yield a target. And then at last the cry comes down from the crow's nest. Sail ho! The ship surges with life. The captain raises his spyglass. There it is, a heavy merchantman low in the water, with cargo ripe for the taking. The hunt begins. Your sloop, faster and more agile, gains steadily. As you close the distance, a flag unfurls from your mast, the Union Jack of England. It is a trick, a disguise, to lower suspicion. Merchant sailors see you and relax, believing you a friendly ship. But deception lasts only so long. When the gap narrows and escape is impossible, the false flag comes down. For a moment, the mast is bare. Then another flag is raised, one that freezes hearts on sight. The Jolly Roger. Black against the sky, it is more terrifying than cannon fire. It is a weapon of the mind. Black, the colour of death, signals no quarter. Red, when flown, means worse blood and no mercy. Symbols vary: a skull with crossed bones, a skeleton with an hourglass, a bleeding heart pierced by a spear. Each tells the same truth. Time is short, death is certain. Surrender now or perish. The effect is devastating. A merchant crew knows they cannot win. Their ship is slower, their weapons few, and their lives are worth less to their captain than his insured cargo. Better to yield than to resist. But not this time. A puff of smoke from the merchantman's side, the boom of a defiant cannon, and a ball splashes into the sea. They have chosen to fight. The captain's voice cuts through the din. His authority in this moment is absolute. Orders fly, sails shift, cannons are run out. Your ship swings across the merchantman's bow, executing a deadly tactic, crossing the T. The first volley erupts. Cannons thunder the deck. Quakes, smoke, chokes the air with sulphur. Chain shot screams through the sky, slicing sails and rigging. Grape shot rakes the deck, scattering men. The enemy staggers, crippled, its mast splintered. Now comes the final act. Grappling hooks arc through the air, bite deep into wood, and with heaving ropes, the two ships crash together. Sharpshooters fire from the rigging, cutting down officers who try to rally their men. Then the quartermaster's cry borders away. With pistol in one hand and sword in the other, you surge over the rail with your brothers. The fight is short, brutal, and decisive. Demoralized and outnumbered, the merchant crew throws down their arms. Silence falls broken only by groans of the wounded and the crackle of splintered timbers. The prize is yours. The adrenaline of battle fades quickly. Smoke clears, the last cries of resistance die away, and the prize lies helpless at your side. Now discipline, not chaos, rules the deck. This is not a drunken free for all of plunder. The quartermaster steps forward, and every man knows what comes next. On a pirate ship, all spoils belong to the company, not to individuals. Any man caught pocketing a coin or trinket before the general division faces the harshest punishment. Theft from the crew is the deepest betrayal, for the brotherhood survives only on fairness. The quartermaster leads a team through the captured vessel, taking careful inventory. The treasure is rarely glittering chests of gold. Wealth lies in cargo barrels of sugar, or tobacco, indigo dye, fine silks, or timber. These are fortunes in the right market. The ship itself is also stripped of everything useful. Cannons, gunpowder, ropes, sails, tools, anchors, even the clothing and small possessions of the captured sailors. Nothing is wasted. Once secured, the pirates steer for a friendly port. Nassau in the Bahamas is the heart of this world, a bustling, lawless haven where merchants look the other way if the price is right. Here, sugar and tobacco turn into silver, silk, into coin powder, into profit. Then comes the most important ritual of all, the division of the prize. The entire crew assembles on deck. The quartermaster announces the total value and opens the compensation fund. First, the wounded are paid. A man missing an eye receives his promised share. Another crippled by a musket ball is given silver before anyone else touches a coin. This act, written in the articles, is sacred. Only when the injured are cared for is the rest of the plunder divided. The captain receives his agreed 2 shares, the quartermaster 1.5, skilled men slightly more. Then your name is called. You step forward, and the quartermaster drops a heavy cloth bag into your hand. Inside, silver and gold clink together, a fortune compared to the meager pay of merchant service. What you hold now is wealth beyond anything you could have earned in years of honest labour. It is more than money. It is proof that you are free, respected, and rewarded as an equal. For the first time in your life, you are not cheated or beaten down. You stand in the sun as a man who has earned his fortune by his own courage. With the division complete, discipline loosens. The cry goes up shore, leave. Longboats are lowered, and you and your brothers row toward land. The feel of sand beneath your feet after months at sea is dizzying, almost unreal. Nassau sprawls before you. Not a neat colonial town, but a wild sprawl of taverns, tents, and wooden shacks pressed against the beach. The air is thick with smells: roasting meat, cheap rum, unwashed bodies, and the smoke of tobacco. Pirates from every ship mingle here, hundreds of them, laughing, shouting, already drunk. This is the Pirate Republic, where no governor rules, no navy prowls, and no law restrains. Your share of silver so hard won now burns in your pocket. Inside the tavern, the noise is deafening, voices raised in song and argument, dice rattling against wood mugs slamming onto tables. You trade a coin for a bottle of raw rum, thick and burning down your throat. This is not watered grog, but fire in a cup. Here money is spent as recklessly as it is earned. Some gamble away a month's fortune on the throw of dice, then laugh and buy the next round. Some feast until they can eat no more. Others buy new weapons, shirts of fine linen, or trinkets to wear as badges of pride. Few save. Tomorrow is never promised. Why hoard for a future you may not live to see? For days the riot continues, drinking, eating, gambling, shouting, a blur of reckless joy. But silver does not last. One morning you wake with a pounding head and an empty purse. Around you, your shipmates are in the same state. The call goes out, the vessel is repaired, restocked, ready to sail again. You stumble back aboard, the wild week ashore fading behind you. Ahead lies the ordered chaos of the ship, the pendulum swing between discipline and freedom. Long voyages stretch ahead, with no horizon but the sea. In that monotony, the crew turns to other ways to survive the boredom. Life at sea soon settles back into rhythm, but monotony is a dangerous enemy. When the work is done, when the horizon remains empty, day after day, men turn to one another for diversion. It is here in these long hours that the culture of your new brotherhood begins to reveal itself. The most cherished pastime is music. Your crew is fortunate among you. Sails a fiddler, a man so valued that he is excused from the harshest labour and still entitled to a full share of plunder. In the quiet hours after supper, he perches on a coil of rope bow, dancing across strings, and the mournful notes of his fiddle drift over the dark sea. The sound is lonely, haunting, yet it binds the crew together in a shared moment of beauty. Two kinds of songs dominate life aboard. The first are sea shanties, work songs designed not to entertain, but to unify. When a heavy sail must be hoisted, or the great anchor raised, a shantyman calls out a line, and the crew roars the chorus in time, heaving as one on the final word. The rhythm makes the impossible manageable, turning dozens of men into a single machine of muscle and breath. The second are forecastle ballads sung during off-watch hours in the forward part of the deck. These long, winding songs tell tales of battles fought, loves lost, and legends of men who carved their names into the sea. They are oral history passed from ship to ship, each verse preserving memory, pride, and identity. In a world where few can read, these songs are the archive of your people. When music rests, gambling takes its place. Men cluster in groups, playing cards stained with grease or dice carved from bone. Wagers are laid not only in coin, but in rum rations, or even the very shirt off a man's back. Excitement runs hot, tempers hotter. The ship's articles allow it, but cheating is met with swift punishment, for nothing poisons brotherhood faster than suspicion. And then there are the stories. At night, beneath a sky littered with stars, voices rise in turn. Some boast of daring raids or narrow escapes. Others whisper ghostly tales, phantom ships, like the Flying Dutchman, or spirits of drowned sailors haunting the waves. More often, it is gossip news from the last port, about which governors offer pardons, which navy captains hunt the coast, which merchantmen are rumoured to sail heavy with cargo. Storytelling is more than entertainment. It is how legends are born, and how survival depends on shared knowledge. But as you listen, you notice a divide between legend and reality. Tales of buried treasure captains making enemies walk the plank, and pirates with parrots perched on their shoulders swirl among the crew. Yet the longer you live the life, the more you see that truth is far less theatrical and far more practical. Take buried treasure. The image of a chest hidden beneath sand map, marked with an X, is perhaps the most powerful of pirate myths. But you quickly learn it almost never happened. Pirates lived by the creed of a short life and a merry one. Money was to be spent on rum, food, and freedom, now not saved for a future most would never see. The loot belonged to the company, divided fairly among all. A captain who tried to bury wealth for himself would be overthrown or killed. The myth comes largely from one extraordinary case, Captain William Kidd. Once a privateer with government sanction, he turned outlaw and, hunted by the authorities, buried some of his spoils before seeking pardon in New York. His capture and execution gave rise to tales of hidden wealth stories that centuries later inspired Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. But in truth, Kidd was the exception, not the rule. The same is true of Walking the Plank. The image is unforgettable, a captive bound and blindfolded, forced to step off a narrow board into shark-infested seas. But history shows almost no reliable evidence of the practice. It is a fiction born of 19th century writers and immortalized in J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. Real pirates were brutal but practical. If they wanted someone dead, a blade or bullet was quicker. If they wanted them gone, the sea was always open, no plank required. And the parrot, that colourful companion perched on a pirate's shoulder, owes its fame not to history but to Stevenson's creation Long John Silver and his bird Captain Flint. Exotic pets were rare and impractical aboard crowded, dangerous ships. The shriek of a parrot might charm readers, but in the chaos of battle it would be a liability. Reality strips away the romance, yet what remains is in many ways more compelling. Pirates governed themselves with contracts and votes. They insured the wounded and shared their spoils. They were not the caricatures of fiction, but men who dared to create a society apart from kings and crowns. Still, unease creeps in. Whispers grow in every port, governors offering fewer pardons, warships patrolling with greater purpose. The tide is turning, and the age of freedom at sea is drawing to a close. The whispers become harder to ignore. In taverns and dockside alleys, you hear it again and again: the great empires are finished, tolerating the republics of outlaws. For years, England, Spain and France were too busy warring with one another to patrol every sea lane. That distraction allowed piracy to bloom. But now peace has been signed, and with it comes a new mission: crush the black flag once and for all. The strategy begins with a carrot before the stick. From London comes the King's Pardon, a royal proclamation promising forgiveness to any pirate who surrenders by a set date. Crimes will be wiped away, and a man can rejoin society without fear of the noose. For older sailors, weary of hunger and risk, the offer is tempting. They can take their hard-earned shares, return to shore, and live quietly. Some, like Benjamin Hornigold, once a mentor to Blackbeard, accept the pardon, laying down their arms in exchange for peace. But many view it as a trap. They have built their lives on freedom, on the defiance of crowns and laws. To them, surrender is betrayal. The brotherhood begins to fracture loyalty, splitting between those who trust the pardon and those who refuse it. And then comes the stick. Great warships, frigates bristling with cannon sail into the Caribbean and along the American coast. These are not lumbering merchantmen, but sleek predators, captained by seasoned officers, crewed by disciplined marines. Against them, a nimble sloop is no match. Alongside these ships arrive governors with a singular purpose: eradicate piracy. One such man is Woodes Rogers himself, once a privateer. In 1718 he sails into Nassau with warships at his back, carrying both the King's Pardon and the threat of annihilation. He knows the pirate world intimately and uses both carrot and stick with ruthless skill. Other governors, like Alexander Spotswood of Virginia, pursue the campaign with fanatic zeal. Spotswood becomes obsessed with bringing down Blackbeard, sending ships and soldiers even beyond his legal reach. The bitterest blow of all comes from within. Pardoned pirates are recruited to hunt their former brothers. Men like Hornigold, who know every cove and hiding place, every tactic and trick, now lead the chase against those who once fought beside them. The brotherhood is no longer just divided, it is devouring itself. Every port now feels less like sanctuary, more like a trap. The sea, once wide and free, feels smaller as warships multiply. Each raid carries greater risk, each voyage tighter odds. For every pirate still under the black flag, the question is no longer where is the next prize, but how will my story end? The Golden Age, so furious and free, proves fleeting, and with its end comes reckoning. Some will die in battle, others at the gallows, some abandoned on lonely islands, and a few vanish into obscurity with the King's Pardon. The fate of the Brotherhood is being written, and you are sailing straight into its final chapter. The end of a pirate's story rarely follows the same script. Some find it in the thunder of battle, others in the silence of exile, still others in the public shame of the gallows. For every man who once stepped across the rail to join the Brotherhood, the unspoken question always lingered: how will it finish for me? For many, death comes swiftly in smoke and blood. A broadside shatters the deck, a musket ball finds its mark, or a splinter the size of a spear drives into flesh. In the chaos of close combat, swords clash and pistols fire at arm's length. To die like this, fighting until the end, was often seen as the more honourable fate. Blackbeard himself, the terror of the Atlantic, met his end this way, in 1718, cut down in brutal combat against Lieutenant Robert Maynard and his men. For others, the story ends in chains. Captured by the Navy, they are hauled to colonial ports, such as Port Royal or Kingston. There, in special admiralty courts, trials are swift and sentences predetermined. Pirates are rarely given a chance to plead their case. The gallows awaits, and the hanging is public, a warning staged for maximum effect. Sometimes bodies are placed in iron cages, hung at harbour entrances, the rotting remains serving as a grisly reminder to any sailor tempted by outlaw life. Yet not all punishments come from the outside world. Some come from within. Pirates who betray their brothers, steal from the crew, or break their oath may face exile through marooning. Left on a deserted island with a flask of water, a knife, and perhaps a pistol with a single shot, the condemned is abandoned. Survival is possible but unlikely. The silence of such an end is perhaps more haunting than the roar of cannon fire. Still, not every story ends in violence. Many accept the king's pardon. Thousands melt quietly back into society, their years at sea becoming little more than a chapter of memory. They swear allegiance to the crown walk ashore and vanish into the lives they once fled. Their names are lost to history, their tales untold. And then there are the legends. Stories of pirates like Henry Every, who supposedly disappeared with unimaginable treasure to live like a king in hiding. Stories of men who escaped both gallows and sea, who bought freedom with silver and vanished. These endings are rare, perhaps myth, but they ignite the imagination of every sailor staring into the horizon, dreaming that he too might beat the odds. Thus the Golden Age of Piracy draws to its close. Some meet it in blood, some in rope, some in silence, and a few in dreams of paradise. For every man still under the black flag, the answer is near. And for you standing on deck with the wind in your face, the question sharpens when the end comes. Which fate will be mine? When the last shots fade and the final hangings are carried out, history does what it always does. It reshapes memory. The brutal truth of life at sea hardtack, crawling with weevils, back-breaking labour, and the constant sting of the whip begins to dissolve. In its place rises something far more alluring. The transformation begins almost immediately. In 1724, while some pirates are still being hunted, a book appears in London, a general history of the robberies and murders of the most notorious pirates. Its author hides behind the name Captain Charles Johnson, though no one knows his true identity. The book is part fact, part theatre. It details the codes, the battles, the names, Blackbeard, Calico, Jack, Anne, Bonnie, Mary, Reed, but it shapes them into characters larger than life. Real men and women become legends, their deeds retold with a storyteller's flourish. The volume is an instant sensation, and for over a century, it cements the image of pirates as both brutal and fascinating. Decades later, in the late 1802, the myth deepens. Robert Louis Stevenson, writing for his stepson, draws upon those tales to craft Treasure Island. Published in 1883, it becomes the most influential pirate story ever written. Stevenson takes a rare historical event, the buried wealth of Captain Kidd, and transforms it into the universal symbol of piracy. A secret map, an X in the sand, treasure hidden on a lonely island, these tropes do not come from history. They come from his imagination. His greatest creation is Long John Silver, the one-legged cook with a sly smile and a parrot named Captain Flint. Silver is cunning, charming, treacherous, and unforgettable. He becomes the blueprint for every fictional pirate that follows. From him comes the parrot on the shoulder, the sing-song sea shanties, the roguish grin that hides betrayal. Stevenson does not just tell a story, he invents an archetype. By the early 20th century, another force takes hold: cinema. Hollywood seizes the adventure of Treasure Island and makes it visible. Errol Flynn and others bring to life the swashbuckler sword in hand, leaping across rigging, rescuing maidens, laughing in the face of danger. The outlaw becomes not a criminal, but a hero, dashing and romantic. The pirate, once feared as the enemy of all mankind, is remade into a figure of charm and freedom. And then in the modern age, the image evolves yet again. Captain Jack Sparrow, born from Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, embodies centuries of myth rolled into one. Witty, eccentric, unpredictable. He is less a brutal outlaw than a trickster hero, a symbol of rebellion wrapped in comedy. From history to legend, from legend to myth, the pirate has travelled far. The real men lived short, harsh lives. They suffered, they bled, and they died in anonymity or shame. But the stories told about them, first by pamphleteers, then by novelists, then by filmmakers, turned them into something enduring. They became emblems of freedom, of defiance of the dream, to live outside the chains of law and crown. The Golden Age of Piracy lasted barely a generation, yet the legend it left has proven immortal. Perhaps it is because somewhere deep inside we still dream of the black flag snapping in the wind of the horizon, unruled of a world where maps still bear blank spaces and an X marks the spot. And so our journey through this shadowed chapter of history comes to an end. From harsh reality to enduring myth, from the hunger and fear of real sailors to the immortal charm of fictional rogues, the pirate has sailed on through time. Thank you for joining me tonight. May your own voyage be calm, your sleep peaceful, and your dreams free. The sea is quiet now. The sails are furled, the lanterns dimmed, and the voices of your brothers drift into silence. You lie in your hammock, rocked gently by the ship's motion, and reflect on the journey you have taken. Only months ago, you were a weary sailor under a captain's lash, chained to endless labour for wages you might never see. Tonight you are something else, an outlaw but also a free man. You think of the code you signed, the ink still etched into the worn parchment. Fair shares of plunder, votes for every man, compensation for the wounded, rules to keep quarrels ashore, and flames extinguished at night. In the world you left, such fairness was unthinkable. On this ship it is the law. Crude though it may be, it is your republic afloat. The sounds of the ship lull you, the creak of timbers, the sigh of ropes, the slap of waves against the hull. Even here, surrounded by danger and hunted by kings, there is a strange peace. You know it cannot last. Whispers in port tell of governors tightening their grip of warships, multiplying of pardons, offered with one hand, and chains hidden in the other. Yet for this night at least, you are part of something rare, a fleeting society where outcasts forged their own rules. This is the legacy of the pirates. They were not simply thieves nor merely villains. They were men who, in the face of cruelty, created their own form of justice. Their world was brutal, short, and uncertain, but in it burned an idea that outlived their ships, that men could govern themselves, share equally, and live without masters. History remembers them as outlaws. Legend has reshaped them into heroes. But beneath myth and memory, the truth remains. For one brief generation, they carved out a space of freedom in a world that denied them any. And as you drift towards sleep, listening to the endless sea, you realize why their story still endures. It is not just about treasure or battles or death. It is about the longing that lives in every heart for a life lived on one's own terms, however short it may be. The golden age of piracy has passed, but its echo lingers in song, in story, and in the restless dreams of those who still yearn for horizons without end. Thank you for sailing with me tonight. May the winds be kind, the seas calm, and your dreams filled with freedom. The voyage into history leaves you thoughtful, night after night, as the stars wheel overhead, and the creak of timbers becomes the only rhythm. You know you understand how fleeting this golden age truly was. Pirates carved out a sliver of freedom, but empires never sleep. They adjust, they adapt, and they always return with greater strength. For a generation, the brotherhood thrived, striking fear into the world's trade routes, capturing wealth beyond imagination. But the tide of power has shifted. Naval patrols grow stronger. Ports that once welcomed you now shut their gates. Governors use pardons as bait and gallows as threat. The seas that once felt endless now close around you. Still, the memory of what you built remains. A ship where every man's voice mattered. A community that cared for its wounded. A life where courage and skill could lift you higher than birth or rank ever would. For men who had known nothing but cruelty under lawful flags, this was revolution, even if it sailed only for a brief time. The legends that followed reshaped it. All turned hunger and fear into treasure, and song turned harsh democracy into romantic adventure. But as you lie in your hammock, eyes heavy with exhaustion, you know the truth. The real story is not about parrots or maps marked with X's. It is about ordinary men who refused to bow, who chose risk over servitude, and who built something entirely their own. This, more than gold or plunder, is the true legacy of the Black Flag. It is why their tale endures centuries later, because even in a world ruled by kings and merchants, there was once a fleeting republic at sea where outlaws lived and died free. And so our journey together reaches its close. Thank you for joining me across these waters, for leaving behind the noise of the modern world and stepping into the shadows of the past. If you've enjoyed this voyage, please remember to like the video, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. I always look forward to reading where in the world you're listening from and at what hour of the night. Now close your eyes. Let the hum of history fade into the silence of your own room. May the winds be gentle, the seas calm, and your dreams filled with adventure. The hammock rocks gently beneath you, and the ship's timbers groan like an old man sighing in his sleep. Around you, the breaths of 80 men rise and fall, punctuated by snores and murmurs. It is a strange comfort, this crowded, airless world below deck. You close your eyes, but the smell of tar, sweat, and the foul bilge never lets you forget where you are. Morning comes with the rasp of the boatswain's voice. Another watch begins. You climb to the deck and are greeted by endless blue horizon, stretching in every direction. The sea is vast, beautiful, and merciless. It offers no rest. Work waits, as it always does. Hours are spent caulking seams with oakum, hammering sticky fibres into cracks to keep the ocean at bay. Ropes must be tarred against the sun and salt. Cannons must be scrubbed and inspected powder kept dry. Even the planks of the deck are scoured to scrape away the slick green algae that blooms in the damp sea air. Each task is tedious, but neglect means death. A careless rope, a weak seam, or a wet powder horn could spell disaster in storm or battle. And then there is the climb. You haul yourself high into the rigging, swaying with the mast, the wind whipping your clothes as you smear tar across the ropes. From up here, the world feels both infinite and terrifying. Below, waves stretch out forever. Above, sails crack like thunder when the gusts catch them just right. It is dangerous, exhausting work, but it is survival. Sometimes duty takes you to the crow's nest, a lonely perch above the world. There you spend hours staring at the line where sea meets sky. Yet it is also endless, hypnotic, and heavy with responsibility. One mistake, one missed shadow, could cost the crew their fortune or their lives. When you're 4 hours on watch end, 4 hours off follow. But off does not mean leisure. You eat your ration of hardtack and salted pork, soak a shirt in seawater to wash it, patch a tear with needle and thread, sharpen your knife, and try to catch a little sleep. Then the bell sounds, and the cycle begins again. Work, rest, until days blur into each other, marked only by the position of the sun. Yet for all its sameness, life here feels different from the merchant ship you left behind. There is no whip cracking over your back, no captain inventing fines to cheat you of wages. Every man knows the work matters not for the profit of some distant merchant, but for the survival and fortune of the crew itself. A ship kept clean and fast will catch prizes. A cannon kept ready may save your life. And when the plunder comes, your share will be yours. No deductions, no tricks. It is not fear that drives you now, but purpose. Each pull on the rope, each stitch in canvas, each swing of the tar brush is part of something larger. You are not a servant. You are a shareholder in this dangerous enterprise, an equal voice in its fate. The sun dips low, and the cycle continues. Work, rest, work. In the monotony, you realize something profound. The true enemy of a pirate's life is not storm or battle. It is boredom, vast and unrelenting as the sea itself. The weeks drag on, and the sea offers nothing but horizon. You begin to notice how this strange republic actually governs itself and why it works. The ship is a democracy in practice, yet not a free-for-all. Authority is divided with careful intent, shaped by the hard lessons of men who once lived under tyranny. The captain is respected but not feared. His skill as a navigator and his courage in battle earn him authority. In combat, his word is law. When cannons fire and grappling hooks fly, hesitation is death. He decides the angle of attack the moment to board the tactics that will carry the day. In those frantic hours, he is a king, but only then. When the smoke clears and silence returns, his power dissolves. He cannot flog a man, for insolence cannot change the course of the ship without consent. Cannot even claim the captain's cabin as his own, unless the crew agrees. He was elected, and he can be deposed. Cowardice in battle, repeated failure to find prizes, or arrogance toward the crew, any of these can bring a vote to strip him of command. On a pirate ship, the captain serves at the will of his men. The true weight of daily authority lies with the quartermaster. If the captain is the war chief, the quartermaster is the peace chief. He is chosen by the crew to defend their interests, and his reach touches every part of life aboard. He measures out food and water so that each man receives his rightful share. He hears disputes and renders judgment, ensuring quarrels do not fester into violence. If punishment is needed, it is he who enforces it, not the captain whose personal grudges have no place in justice. When a prize is taken, the quartermaster leads, the boarding decides what is seized, and guards the spoils until they can be divided. He is the steward of fairness, the balance against tyranny. If the captain embodies boldness, the quartermaster embodies trust. This system is ingenious, and you see why it works. Power is split, so that no man can dominate the others. One commands in battle, the other safeguards in peace. Together, they create a government afloat, a system of checks and balances that protects every sailor from the abuses they once endured. Day by day, you watch it in action. The quartermaster moving through the ship, settling a gambling dispute here, doling out rations there. The captain charting the course, his eyes fixed on stars and compass. Each man has his role, and the crew thrives in the balance. Yet, even as you admire this fragile republic, your stomach reminds you of a harsher truth. Discipline and fairness do not fill an empty belly. And though your share of plunder is fair, the daily food is still the same hardtack and salted meat you once cursed on merchant ships. What changes now is not the menu, but the freedom to supplement it and the chance to turn survival into feast when fortune smiles. At first, your meals disappoint you. The daily ration is as grim as before. Biscuits of hardtack, tough as wood, and alive with weevils. Salted beef and pork, soaked so long in brine, they must be scraped and boiled before they can be chewed. Dried beans, peas, or oatmeal that offer little more than bulk. Water stored for weeks in casks turns green and slimy, so rum is mixed with it to make grog. The drink is harsh, but it lifts spirits and makes the foul water tolerable. Yet here, unlike the merchant ship, the crew has freedom. A pirate vessel sails to no master's timetable. If supplies run low, the quartermaster may order the ship to anchor at an uninhabited island. Armed not for war but for hunting, the crew spreads out through the brush, chasing pigs or goats. The smell of roasting meat over an open fire makes mouths water. To taste flesh unsalted, cooked fresh above glowing coals, is a feast beyond imagining after weeks of monotony. At sea, fishing lines are trailed behind the stern, catching tuna or other large fish. But the greatest prize is the sea turtle abundant in the Caribbean. Easy to catch while sleeping on the surface, they are so valuable that they are kept alive on their backs aboard the deck for weeks, providing fresh meat whenever needed. And then come the feasts after a successful capture. When a merchantman falls, the most prized discovery is often not the cargo hold but the captain's stores. Here, barrels of French wine casks of brandy, sacks of sugar, fine flour, and fragrant spices might be found. Sometimes there are even chickens clucking in crates, or a pig meant for the captain's table. That night the ship transforms. Bread bakes in the galley, meat roasts on spits, mugs brim with stolen wine. Sea shanties rise in raucous chorus, fiddles play, and for a few hours pirates dine like kings. Salt sores are forgotten, wounds are bandaged with laughter, and every man feels rich. This is the true reward of piracy. Not only silver coins, but the chance to eat, drink, and live as though tomorrow may never come. But danger never leaves the deck. A slip of a knife while cutting rope, a broken bone from a fall, or the sudden fever that spreads quickly in cramped quarters. Any of these can end a man's life. Medicine is crude, and trained surgeons are rare. When one is captured, he is valued as dearly as gold, and persuaded to stay with the crew offered equal shares and protection. If no surgeon is aboard, the duty falls to whoever has the closest skills, often the carpenter, whose saws and steady hands make him grimly suited to amputation. Rum and laudanum numb the pain, shipmates hold the patient down, and speed is the only mercy. The smell of tar sealing a wound, the screams of men cauterized with hot iron, are grim reminders of the price of survival. Yet even here, the pirate code offers protection. A man crippled in service receives silver before plunder is divided. Brothers do not abandon their own. In a world that discards broken sailors, this pledge is rare, and it binds the crew together more tightly than chains. Navigation is the heartbeat of the voyage, and without it, even the fiercest crew would drift into doom. On a sea without roads, where the horizon is an unbroken circle of water, to know where you are and where you are headed is survival itself. The captain shoulders this burden, and sometimes he is aided by a sailing master, a specialist whose craft is plotting courses. His tools are few but priceless. Charts drawn by hand, often stolen from captured ships, sketch coastlines and mark hidden shoals. They are precious, but also flawed maps of hope, as much as maps of truth. To steer the right course, the compass shows direction steady, even when clouds hide the stars. But distance is just as vital. For that, sailors use the chiplog, a small weighted board tied to a knotted rope. Cast over the stern, it trails in the wake as a sandglass counts the seconds. The number of knots that slip through a sailor's hands reveals the ship's speed. It is from this practice that the term knots survives to this day. Latitude, the measure north or south, is easier to learn. At noon, the captain sights the sun with a quadrant or astrolabe. At night, he measures the North Star's height above the horizon. These angles tell him roughly how far up or down the world he has sailed. But longitude, east or west, remains unsolved in this age. Without precise clocks, it is guesswork. Dead reckoning becomes the art of survival. From a known point, the navigator calculates how far and in what direction the ship has travelled, adjusting for storms, currents, and sheer instinct. A skilled man reads more than instruments. He studies the sea itself. The colour of water hints at depth. The flight of birds whispers of land. The swell of waves reveals distant winds. Navigation is part science, part intuition, and entirely vital. Day after day, the horizon never changes, yet each calculation and each observation keeps hope alive. And then the moment comes, the cry from the masthead, "Sail ho!" The ship bursts into action. The captain, glass to his eye, confirms it a heavy merchantman, low in the water, rich with cargo. Your sloop, swift and lean, bears down on it like a hawk. But you do not rush blindly. First comes the deception. A flag is raised, the English Union Jack. To the merchant crew, you appear harmless, another countryman crossing the trade routes. Closer and closer you creep. The merchantmen relax unsuspecting. Then the trap is sprung. The false flag comes down, and in its place rises a new banner, the Jolly Roger. Black as night, stark against the sky, it announces death. The message is unmistakable. The black flag means no quarter resist, and you will die. The red flag means worse, total slaughter, no survivors. The symbols vary: a skull and crossbones, a skeleton with an hourglass, a bleeding heart pierced by a spear, but the meaning is always terror. Reputation is a pirate's sharpest blade. The more feared the captain, the more likely a ship will surrender without firing a shot. But not today. A puff of smoke, a boom from the merchantman's side, and a ball splashes into the sea. They dare to resist. At once the captain takes command. His orders fly, his voice cutting through the roar of the sea. The ship surges forward, turning across the enemy's bow. You are crossing the T, lining your broadside against their narrow front. Cannons are loaded, not just with iron balls, but with chain shot to shred sails, grape shot to sweep decks. The command comes, fire. The world erupts, a wall of flame and thunder smoke choking the air, the deck shuddering under the recoil. The acrid taste of powder fills your mouth. When the haze clears, the enemy is crippled, mast-cracked sails in tatters, men scattered in chaos. Now grappling hooks, fly lines are pulled taut, and the ships slam together with a crunch of splintered wood. Sharpshooters fire from the rigging, cutting down officers. Then the quartermaster's voice rises above the din borders away. With pistol and cutlass in hand, you leap the rail. The fight is short, brutal and decisive. Outnumbered and broken, the merchant crew surrenders. The deck falls silent, but for the groans of the wounded. Smoke drifts away on the wind. The prize is yours. The battle is over, but the work has only begun. Victory does not mean chaos, it means discipline. The quartermaster steps forward, his voice firm, and the rules of the brotherhood snap into place. This is not a mob tearing at spoils. It is a company dividing wealth bound by trust and law. Every item seized is inventoried. Chests of coin are rare. True riches are found in the hold tobacco, bundled tight barrels of sugar, sticky with molasses, indigo dye, packed in bales, silks folded in crates. These goods sold to eager traders will bring fortunes. The ship itself is stripped of anything useful. Cannons, powder, spare rope sails, anchors, tools, even the crew's personal belongings. Nothing is wasted. From there, the pirates sail for a friendly port. Nassau welcomes them, its sandy harbour crowded with taverns and makeshift markets. Here, shady merchants wait with open hands, ready to trade stolen cargo for coin. Deals are struck quickly, barrels rolled ashore, and soon, the wealth of a captured voyage becomes silver in chests. Then comes the ritual. Every man has been waiting for the division of the prize. The crew gathers on deck, eyes fixed on the quartermaster. First debts are honoured. The wounded are called forward and paid. A man who lost an eye receives his promised silver. Another crippled by musket fire is given his due before any other coin is touched. These payments are sacred, and to withhold them would shatter the trust that holds the ship together. Only then does the great division begin. The captain takes his 2 shares, the quartermaster 1.5 skilled men, a little more. And then your name is called. You step forward, heart pounding, and into your hands falls a heavy bag of silver and gold. The weight of it astonishes you. This is not the pitiful shillings of merchant service. This is a fortune more than you could have earned in years of grinding toil. For the first time in your life, you are wealthy. More than that, you are respected, rewarded openly and fairly in front of your brothers. No deductions, no tricks. What you hold is yours, and it was won with your own courage. Shore leave follows. Longboats row through surf and feet touch sand after months at sea. Nassau sprawls before you, not a polished colonial port, but a wild sprawl of taverns, tents and wooden huts. Smoke curls from cook fires, music spills from doorways, and the air is thick with the smell of rum, sweat, and roasted meat. Inside the taverns, chaos reigns. Pirates from a dozen ships crowd the rooms drinking and shouting. You trade a coin for a bottle of raw rum, strong, burning, and triumphant. Around you men gamble, argue, laugh, and spend with abandon. A share that could have supported a family for a year might vanish in a single night. Few save for tomorrow is uncertain. Better to live fully now than to hoard for a future that may never come. For a week, the celebration rages. You feast on roasted pork, buy a new linen shirt, perhaps a fine pistol with silver trim. You laugh, sing, and drink until the purse is empty. And when at last the coins are gone, the quartermaster's call comes once more. The ship is ready. Repaired, resupplied crew accounted for. Back into the boats, you stumble, head-pounding pockets, light memories of revelry still glowing. The taverns fade behind you, replaced by the strict rhythm of life at sea. Again, the pendulum swings from discipline to chaos, from labour to riot, from freedom ashore to order afloat. The days at sea stretch long, and with no prize on the horizon, the enemy becomes monotony. To fight it, the crew turns to culture, to ritual, to one another. This is when you begin to glimpse the heart of pirate life. Not just battle and plunder, but the ways men kept their spirits alive in the endless blue. Music is at the centre of it. Your fiddler remains one of the most important men aboard, valued almost as much as the carpenter. In the evenings after the day's meal, he sits on a coil of rope and lets his bow draw out melodies that drift across the deck. Sometimes they are lively dances, feet pounding the planks in rhythm. Other times they are mournful, aching tunes that seem to echo the loneliness of the sea itself. Two kinds of songs dominate. Work shanties are sung in unison when sails must be raised or anchors hauled. The rhythm transforms brute effort into harmony, dozens of men pulling as one. Forecastle ballads sung during off-watch hours tell longer tales of famous battles, daring raids, lost loves, and tragedies at sea. They are entertainment, yes, but also history and identity, carried from ship to ship by memory and voice. When the music rests, gambling takes its place. Small groups huddle over greasy cards or bone-carved dice, wagering everything from coins to rations of rum to the very shirts off their backs. The risk is intoxicating but dangerous. The code forbids cheating, and punishment is swift when tempers flare. Even here, fairness is guarded. And always there are stories. During the night watch under the sweep of starlight, voices weave tales. Some are boasts of victories exaggerated until truth can hardly be seen. Others are ghost stories, the Flying Dutchman, phantom ships, spirits of the drowned. Still others are scraps of gossip picked up in ports, which governors are offering pardons, which naval frigates patrol the coast, which merchantmen are rumoured heavy with treasure. Storytelling is entertainment, but it is also survival, passing along warnings and opportunities alike. Yet as you listen, you see how myth begins to twist reality. Tales of buried treasure, of men forced to walk the plank of pirates with parrots on their shoulders, spread like wildfire. But you, living the life itself, know the truth is different, simpler, rougher, and in its own way far more remarkable. The myth of buried treasure, for example. The thought of captains burying vast chests of gold and drawing maps marked with an X thrills every sailor. But in truth, pirates lived for the present. Silver and rum were meant to be spent, not saved for a future that might never come. Only in rare cases, like Captain William Kidd hiding his wealth when hunted, did such stories take root. Yet from that seed grew legends that would inspire Treasure Island centuries later. So too with Walking the Plank. The image is unforgettable, a bound man forced off a board into shark-filled waters. But it is fantasy, created by 19th century writers and immortalised in Peter Pan. Pirates, brutal though they were, had quicker methods for execution. A blade, a bullet, or a push overboard far swifter and more certain than elaborate ritual. And the parrot, that colourful companion, owes its fame to Stevenson's Long John Silver or not to history. While sailors sometimes bought exotic pets, they were rare and impractical aboard a crowded fighting ship. The parrot on the shoulder is legend, not fact. What you live each day is harsher, stranger, and more honest than myth. A republic afloat, bound by rules written by its own outcasts. A brotherhood that feeds its wounded, punishes its cheats and feasts. Like kings when fortune smiles, a people hunted by every crown yet for a time free. But freedom cannot last forever. The sea carries whispers, rumours in every port, warnings in every tavern. The Golden Age is ending. The empires, once distracted by wars with one another, now turn their gaze to the Caribbean. Peace on land means war at sea, and the black flag is the enemy. At first comes the promise, the king's pardon. Letters arrive from London, carried by governors and warships. Any pirate who surrenders before a fixed date will be forgiven, his crimes wiped clean, his neck spared the hangman's rope. For some weary from years of hunger and danger, the offer is irresistible. Men like Benjamin Hornigold accept laying down arms and stepping back into society. But others sneer at the parchment. They trust no crown's mercy. To them, surrender is betrayal. They have lived free, fought free, and they will die free. The brotherhood begins to fracture brothers in battle, now divided by loyalty to a promise they cannot agree upon. Then comes the steel. Frigates arrive sleek, fast, bristling with cannon. No sluggish merchantmen now, but predators built for pursuit and war. Their crews are disciplined, their officers seasoned. Against such power, a pirate sloop is fragile prey. Governors sharpen the edge of the blade. Woodes Rogers sails into Nassau with warships at his back, offering pardon with one hand and the threat of annihilation with the other. Alexander Spotswood of Virginia takes personal pride in the hunt, obsessing over the downfall of Blackbeard. He sends ships and men, even beyond his authority, determined to rid the seas of the most infamous outlaw of them all. The cruelest turn comes from within. Pardoned pirates, once brothers, are recruited to hunt their former comrades. They know every hiding cove, every tactic, every weakness. Benjamin Hornigold himself, once a leader of men under the black flag, becomes a relentless hunter of those who refused the pardon. The brotherhood devours itself. The world closes in. The ports that once welcomed you grow dangerous. The sea, once wide and free, feels narrow, hemmed by patrols. Each raid carries heavier risk, each victory bought with greater blood. The question that once drove you, where is the next prize, is replaced by a darker one. How will my story end? The Golden Age of Piracy, fierce and fiery, burns brightly but briefly. And now, under the shadow of empire, its flame begins to die. The end comes in many forms, and none are gentle. For some it is the roar of cannon fire, the crash of splintered timbers, and the sudden silence of death in battle. For others it is the rattle of chains, the sentence of a court, and the hangman's noose swaying before a jeering crowd. For a few it is exile, abandoned on a barren island with nothing but a knife, a flask, and the sea for company. And for the luckiest, it is the king's pardon, a chance to vanish back into society, their years of outlawry reduced to whispered tales. Death in battle is perhaps the most fitting end for a pirate. In the chaos of combat, with musket balls tearing through air and blades flashing in close quarters, many meet their fate swiftly. Blackbeard himself fell this way in 1718, fighting Lieutenant Robert Maynard's men in a final storm of smoke and steel. He died with wounds too numerous to count defiant to his last breath. For those who followed him, such an end was brutal, but it was not shameful. Better to fall in combat than to dangle from a rope. The gallows, however, claimed many more. Once captured, pirates were taken to colonial ports and tried in admiralty courts. These trials were swift, their verdicts all but decided before they began. Public hangings became spectacles attended by hundreds. The condemned stood before the crowd as symbols, their deaths staged as warnings. Some of the most notorious were hung in iron cages called gibbets, their bodies left to rot at harbour entrances where every passing sailor could see their fate. Exile marooning was punishment from within. Betray your crew, steal from the common stock, or defy the articles, and your brothers might leave you behind. A lonely island, a flask of water, a pistol with a single shot. These were your companions. Survival was slim, but not impossible. Still, the solitude was its own torment, the silence, heavier than chains. And then there were those who took the pardon. Thousands accepted it, walking away from the black flag and swearing allegiance to the crown. Some disappeared into quiet lives, their names forgotten. To history they left no mark, but a line in a governor's ledger. To them piracy was only a chapter, wild, dangerous, but brief. Legends speak of rarer endings. Men like Henry Every, who supposedly vanished with untold treasure, living as a king in exile. Such stories are more myth than fact, yet they endure, for every sailor dreamed of escaping the rope with gold enough to buy freedom forever. In truth, most pirates ended not as legends, but as corpses on a battlefield, on a noose, on a beach, or in an unmarked grave. The Golden Age was never built to last. It was a rebellion brief and blazing, destined to be crushed by the weight of empire. Yet even as the Brotherhood fell, its memory lingered. For those who survived, and for those who came after, the question remained, was it worth it? The hunger, the danger, the risk of death, or was the fleeting taste of freedom payment enough? When the cannons fell silent and the gallows were busy, another transformation began. The shift from history into legend. The brutal facts of pirate life faded, replaced by stories told, retold, and embellished until truth and myth were impossible to separate. The first great spark came in 1724 with the publication of A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates. Written under the name Captain Charles Johnson, though his true identity remains a mystery, the book was part record, part theatre. It contained surprisingly accurate details about codes, ships and battles, likely drawn from trials and sailors' accounts. But it also wove those facts into gripping tales of larger-than-life characters. Blackbeard became a demon of smoke and fire. Calico, Jack, Anne, Bonny and Mary Read were immortalised in their daring. Johnson's work became the foundation on which every later pirate story was built. For more than a century, this book was the definitive authority, shaping how the world imagined the Brotherhood. Pirates were no longer just criminals. They were figures of fascination, their lives retold as cautionary tales tinged with admiration. Then, in the late 19th century, a Scottish writer took the torch. Robert Louis Stevenson, seeking to craft a tale for his stepson, reached back into Johnson's stories and reshaped them into something new. In 1883, Treasure Island was published, and the modern image of the pirate was born. Stevenson took a rare historical event, Captain Kidd's buried hoard, and turned it into a universal motif. A map with an X, a deserted island, treasure hidden in the sand. From this invention, generations of readers learned to imagine pirates not as hungry outcasts, but as adventurers chasing fortune. His most brilliant creation was Long John Silver, a charismatic rogue with a missing leg, a sly wit, and a parrot named Captain Flint. Silver embodied contradictions, charming yet treacherous, a friend one moment, a villain the next. Through him, Stevenson forged the archetype that still dominates our imagination. The parrot, the swagger, the glint of humour masking betrayal, these all sprang from fiction, not history. From that point onward, the pirate was no longer a starving sailor, rebelling against tyranny. He was a hero, or at least a roguish anti-hero, crafted to thrill. The reality of hunger, disease and terror was buried under the sand, replaced by treasure maps, rum and adventure. And once the idea took hold, there was no turning back. By the dawn of the 20th century, the pirate had been reborn, not in the Caribbean but on the stage and the screen. The myths that began with Johnson's book and Stevenson's Treasure Island now found new life in the bright flicker of cinema. Hollywood seized on the swashbuckler. In the 1,932nd and 42nd actors, like Errol Flynn, swung from rigging with sword in hand, laughing as they cut down villains and won the hearts of heroines. These films stripped away the hunger, the filth, and the fear. Pirates were no longer the enemies of all mankind, but daring adventurers who lived by courage, charm, and style. Sword fights crackled with acrobatics, sea battles thundered with spectacle, and audiences cheered not for justice, but for rebellion. This romantic vision took hold deeply. The pirate became shorthand for freedom, for living outside the law, yet with wit and grace. They were outcasts, yes, but glamorous ones, whose adventures ended not with hangings or exile, but with victory and love. By mid-century, the idea was complete. The pirate of history, once gaunt and desperate, had been polished into a timeless rogue. In the modern age, that rogue evolved again. Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean launched a new era, giving us Captain Jack Sparrow, a trickster, a jester, a survivor who blurs the line between fool and genius. With his staggering gait and sly grin, Sparrow embodies centuries of myth in a single figure, fearless yet comical, dangerous yet strangely noble. His world is not one of hunger and disease, but of curses, treasures, and magical seas. The transformation is striking. The historical pirate who lived short, brutal lives for a taste of freedom has become an immortal archetype, rebellious, witty, and forever romantic. The whip and the cat-o'-nine-tails are forgotten. The stench of bilge water has faded. In their place are laughter duels and endless adventure. The truth is harsher, but the legend is stronger, and perhaps that is why it endures, because the myth speaks to something deep within us. The legend of the pirate has now sailed so far from its origin that it hardly resembles the men who once walked these decks. Where once there was hunger, there is now romance. Where once there was discipline, there is now whimsy. Yet the power of the myth cannot be denied. It endures because it speaks to something within us, the yearning for freedom. In a world ruled by kings, merchants, and laws written for the powerful, pirates represented defiance. They lived by their own codes, shared their plunder equally, and answered only to themselves. To sailors crushed beneath the lash, this was not villainy, it was justice. To readers centuries later, it became a dream. And so the pirate lives on, in story after story. In children's tales where parrots squawk and treasure maps crinkle. In stage plays where rogues duel under the moonlight. In films where ships explode in fire and heroes swing from ropes with a grin. Each retelling reshapes them, polishing away the dirt until only the glitter of legend remains. Yet behind the myth lies the truth we uncovered. The real pirates were not immortal rogues. They were men of flesh and bone, battered by storms, driven by desperation, united by rebellion. Their lives were short, brutal, and often tragic. But in the space between hardship and hope, they built something unique. A fleeting republic on the waves, a brotherhood bound by rules of their own making. The black flag has long since been lowered. The sea lanes are patrolled, the havens gone, the gallows empty of their infamous prey. But in imagination, the Jolly Roger still flies. It snaps in the wind of our stories, a symbol of rebellion, of danger, and of freedom without chains. And perhaps that is why we still return to these tales. Not for gold, not for parrots, but for that whisper of possibility that life could be lived on one's own terms, even if only for a moment. The truth and the myth now stand side by side like two ships passing each other on a moonlit sea. One is battered wood and salt, the other polished canvas and silver light. The real pirates endured hunger, pain, and fear. The imagined ones dance through stories with laughter, maps, and endless rum. Both linger in our minds, but for very different reasons. History shows us men pushed to desperation. They lived on biscuits, crawling with weevils, drank foul water cut with rum, and risked the lash for the smallest mistake. They built a fragile democracy to guard against tyranny, and they faced death at sea at the noose or alone on barren shores. Their rebellion was fleeting, their victories brief, their lives short. Legend offers something else, a dream. It promises buried treasure and maps with X's. It whispers of captains with parrots and crews who laugh in the face of kings. It gives us Long John Silver's sly grin, Errol Flynn's flashing blade, and Jack Sparrow's staggering swagger. These figures are not weighed down by the whip or the bilge. They are free in a way that the real men never could be. And yet perhaps it is this blending of truth and fiction that gives piracy its lasting hold. The harsh reality reminds us of what people will endure for the chance at freedom. The myth reminds us of what we secretly long for, a life unchained, where courage and wit matter more than rank or birth. The black flag, then, is more than history. It is a symbol. For those who lived it, it meant rebellion against cruelty. For us, it has become a story of adventure, escape, and the eternal hunger for liberty. The memory of piracy did not fade when the last outlaw swung from the gallows. Instead, it grew stronger with each retelling until the myth overshadowed the men themselves. Pamphlets, novels, stage plays, and films layered fantasy atop fragments of truth, polishing the rough edges into something audiences would cheer rather than fear. By the 18th century, Charles Johnson's General History gave the world its first gallery of infamous rogues: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bonnie Mary Red. It shaped them into legends, their deeds repeated around hearths and harbours alike. By the 19th, Stevenson's Treasure Island spun those legends into a story so compelling it redefined piracy forever. With a single book, the buried chest, the map with an X, the parrot on the shoulder became immortal symbols. The 20th century carried the transformation further. Cinema turned pirates into swashbucklers, dazzling and noble, leaping across rigging with swords flashing. Audiences no longer saw them as thieves, they saw them as heroes. And in the 21st century, Jack Sparrow swaggered onto the stage, sealing the pirate's place in popular culture as a trickster, a rebel, and a dreamer. The truth, though, waits beneath the surface. Real pirates lived short, brutal lives. They fought not for glory, but for survival. Not for buried gold, but for fair shares and freedom from cruelty. Their ships were cramped, their food foul, their punishments harsh. Yet within that hardship they created something remarkable. A society governed by choice, where even the lowliest sailor had a voice. It is this duality that fascinates us still. The myth enchants the history grounds. Together they tell a story that is darker than fairy tales, yet brighter than mere fact. It is the story of men who seized a fleeting chance to live as equals, and of how the world, unwilling to remember their hunger, instead remembered their dream. Then, in the quiet of the late 19th century, the final transformation takes hold. Robert Louis Stevenson, writing not history but fiction, creates Treasure Island. With it, he forges the pirate we know today. His map marked with an X, his tale of buried gold, his one-legged rogue with a parrot. These are inventions, yet they become inseparable from the idea of piracy. Long John Silver, sly and magnetic, becomes the archetype. From him spring all the tropes: the parrot squawking insults, the crew muttering sea shanties, the treasure buried beneath palm trees. From there, the legend sails into the age of film. On the silver screen, pirates become swashbucklers, their hardships erased and their dangers romanticized. Errol Flynn and his successors leap across rigging with swords flashing, forever young, forever victorious. By the time Captain Jack Sparrow staggers onto the deck in the 21st century, the metamorphosis is complete. The pirate has ceased to be an outlaw at all. He is now a symbol of rebellion, charm, and adventure, a figure we laugh with, cheer for, and secretly envy. Yet beneath the layers of fiction, the truth still waits. The real pirates were men of desperation, sailors fleeing the lash, carving out brief freedom with cutlass and cannon. They created a society bound by votes and shares, lived in filth and danger, and met their ends in battle on the gallows or marooned in silence. Their golden age lasted scarcely a generation, but its shadow stretches across centuries. And perhaps that is why their story endures, because in their struggle we glimpse something timeless, the desire to live on one's own terms, to defy the powers that grind men down, to claim even a short life of freedom over a long life of chains. That dream born in the creaking hulls of outlaw ships has outlived empires. The black flag no longer flies on the seas, but in our imagination it will never fall. It snaps in the wind of every story told, every song sung, every dream of escape whispered in the night. Pirates are gone, yet they remain with us both as they were and as we wish them to be. Thank you for joining me on this long voyage. From hunger and hardship to myth and memory, we have followed their path across history. May your own night be calm, your rest undisturbed, and your dreams filled with horizons wide and free.